right? I'd be at the service of this Sangha in sharing the things that matter. I'm just going to read you something that helps us get into the issues that at least Rudy proposed for us for today, and then we'll take it from there. This is actually, this is really plagiarism. I took this out of somebody else's book, but I modified it a little bit. It's from a book called Self as Illusion. It's becoming apparent to scientific research that the subtle energy called prana is closely associated, if not entirely identifiable, with electromagnetic fields produced by living cells. We know about this also in the studies of bioluminosity, which are on the web. There are a lot of things about that. Various phenomena, including the rainbow body and experiences of light during meditation practice, suggest that this energy can be developed through a variety of techniques known to the contemplative traditions down through the ages. What has barely begun to be investigated, however, is 1. How meditative practices sensitize one to subtle experiential aspects of these electro or bioelectrical fields. All right? What's the connection between meditation and this apparently biological phenomenon? And 2, how these practices enable one to alter bioelectromagnetic processes in the brain, in the heart, and in the rest of the body. To which we might add a third. To receive these teachings about meditation implies having a prior inclination or a gift for wanting them. To put the teachings into practice also seems to require a prior gift or inclination to do so. To make progress in the journey seems to require a dialectical relationship with a tradition and a spiritual teacher to whom one is affectively devoted. Guru Yoga, right? And without this feature, even prolonged and profound meditation experience does not come to the intended fruition. So we have to deal with the experience of gift, the experience of receptivity, and in a certain sense, as my own spiritual teacher, Brother David, would say, gratefulness, right? The ability to receive and be grateful for that which we are given, right? Our task, therefore, is fairly clear: to rediscover for our own times a scheme of contemplative training that takes us from an ordinary mind, conscious and burdened with pain and frustration, towards a body-mind complex that is free of pain, open to new horizons, creative, flourishing, and altruistic. My research on the dissolution of the body after death has disclosed key features of this transformative continuum. I'm looking forward to sharing some methods and critical thinking based on spiritual research undertaken over the past 50 years under the guidance of masters, both East and West, in the great contemplative traditions. Okay, so that's where we're going today. The handout is a walkthrough of this. Okay, this is the financial report for the parish I no longer have to worry about. My brother David taught me years ago, great master, don't waste paper. So recycle. So it's all recycled. And there's the financial report. Oh, thank the Lord I don't have to pay those bills anymore. All right, so basically the approach, which I've given in a number of retreats to my students in Europe, from coarse to subtle. From coarse to subtle. Think of alchemical processes, think of distillation, right? When I'm preparing medicinal herbal preparations, of course I can cheat and I can go to the grocery store. I don't know if they allow this in DC, but in Italy you can buy a bottle of regular alcohol, all right, ethanol, 95%, and people use it to make liqueurs, all right, and so I go to the store and I use that. But when I really want to do serious, spagyric medicines, right, I distill several liters of old wine, okay, and get the alcohol from the wine, all right, through a distillation process. And then I use that to do extractions, either by putting the plants in the alcohol directly, sealing up my mason jar, putting it in the dark, or I use the Soxhlet extractor. Do we know what a Soxhlet extractor is? That is a wild piece of equipment, let me tell you. Straight out of one of those 1950s science fiction movies, okay? And it does multiple distillations and extractions of herbal materials, okay? And you can use, you put the alcohol in the flask at the bottom with a whole bunch of herbs, and it all goes up the column, and it comes down again into a paper cone that holds more of the herbs, and that process can be continued as long as you want to get a very good extraction of both the essential oils and the other substances. Well, now, when you do that, right, and you do it with love, you do it with a desire to heal, the connection between what's going on chemically and what's going on inside of you, all right, a crossover occurs, right? There's a crossover that occurs. So I'm going to use the word crossover to describe this process. It also goes right in to, for example, I see Namkhai Norpo Rinpoche's picture on the wall. If you do that purification mantra of the 5 elements, A ho shude shude, yam ho shude shude, bam ho shude shude. What are we doing? We are taking the coarse manifestation of the 5 elements and we are transforming it into light, or we are not transforming, actually we're recognizing the subtle, uncongealed quality of light in the elements, all right? And in so doing, we are, the world around us and our body-mind complex are participating in a crossover process, okay? So we're going to look at that step by step together. We're basing ourselves on the principle that the human body already radiates light and electromagnetic energy. Our practices are designed to enhance the production of energy in such a way as to open up the inherent possibilities of a matter-energy crossover. We might speak of a transformation, but in reality we're simply crossing over from an emphasis on the material gross manifestation of energy to a liberation of the manifestation of the subtle energetic aspect of our presence in this space-time continuum. We recognize that our existence is itself a gift, and we're grateful for it. We recognize that the real nature of lead is gold, and we are open to the crossover. Okay? We recognize that the 5 elements of coarse manifestation are from light of their corresponding colors, electromagnetic energy across the spectrum, both visible and invisible. And we're open to shifting our awareness in the direction of photons as waves more than particles, right? Our quantum awareness. By the way, where I live in southern Italy, I'm on a hillside, and I'm at 640 meters above sea level. And in our mountain environment, between 2 great mountain ranges or great folds of the Apennines, it's not unusual to get some rainfall, and that fine, subtle rain that is often associated with the rainbow body phenomenon itself. And, it's really a neat place to live. I remember as an undergrad at Cornell, you could watch storms coming across Lake Cayuga towards the heights of the campus. And it was like watching the gods coming, flinging thunderbolts. They just come, the clouds would just come roaring at you. We don't. Sometimes that happens, and also the gods like to run around in great circles of our mountain with thunderbolts flying, but sometimes it's subtle. And a couple of weeks ago, I took notes on the rainbow that appeared toward late afternoon, and I'm sure you've done this too. The rainbow colors are arranged in a certain order, and from spectrum studies, right, what that means is differences in wavelengths of the different colors that have been split up by the particles of water in the atmosphere, all right? So although the particles individually break up the individual photons of light, they combine together to create a macro image, that is the macro rainbow, all right? This is quite interesting, all right? When you think about it, the crossover between a body and a rainbow body, okay? So there is an alignment of the micro prisms that produces the rainbow. There is a realignment of the micro prisms of the embodied state. All right, and that's what we're working on. Okay. So keep that rainbow in mind. Usually when we begin a session of practice, I don't know how you do it, but at home I do it this way. I start with working with my body. Okay, and so I'll do some of the asanas of Hatha Yoga and some movements that are a little bit Yantra Yoga, a little bit Tai Chi. One of the practices that is very helpful, because we are talking about the subtle body, is just below the navel there is that famous spot, right, in different traditions. And if you put one hand there and move your arms in circles this way and backward and then switch sides, all right, already you're beginning to move the energies, the winds, right, in Tibetan, the lung or the prana, through your body, right, and channeling it very gently into the central channel from the bottom up, right? We know about this. And there are a number of things you can do to enhance that. But that's a very good, and it's a gentle practice. All of these practices really should be done in a relaxed, focused way. Okay, relaxed and focused, with a sense of balance. So you work with the body and prepare the body for its wonderful operation as a Saksat extractor, right, as a distillation operation, right, with all kinds of wonderful things going on inside you. If you know the work of Jason Bedun, his name is, who wrote on the not the alchemical body, that's David Gordon White, but the Manichaean body. Do we know this book? It's a very, very in-depth study of the Central Asian and Chinese Manichaean texts, showing that the Manichaean food ritual was conceived of precisely as an alchemical distillation process. And there are even drawings and diagrams showing the body as that digestion is a transformative process for the sparks of light inside food. Okay, so the elect were the higher rank Manichaeans who were fed by the hearers, the ordinary lay people, right? And then that food was to be transformed so that the light sparks could be liberated. So already in that conception, that combining digestion and ritual, there is this movement towards the manifestation of light. Okay, and that's an important feature on the ground level of what we're talking about. It's the coarse body and its support of food, right? I mean, the body made of food. Ahammanam, ahammanam, ahammanam. We know this from the Upanishads. I am food, I am food, I am the eater of the food, and so on and so forth. Very famous mantra. That is present there. You start with that. Then we work with the breath. Okay, so you're working with the breath. You're still thereby working with the body. You're working with prana. You're working with energy. But now we're working on a slightly subtler level because, as we know, we take in the air, and with the air we take in oxygen, which is visualized as luminous, right? In Norbu Rinpoche's mantra of purification for the five elements, we start with and that letter Ah is here in a sphere of indigo light surrounded by the colors of the five elements, as if they were a circular rainbow, right at the heart chakra. And that Ah then moves us into the purification mantra. But before you've done that, there are the 9 cycles of breath purification, which are done as a combination of body work and breath work, because you're moving the arms, you're positioning the body in a certain way with the, now in the case of women it's the right hand, in the case of men it's the left hand. Your hand is touching the 2 acupuncture points on either side of the knees, and you raise the elbow high as you can, and then you inhale with that side all nice and stretched, and then you close the corresponding nostril and exhale the smoky air out the left side. And then you, or in the case of women, the right side. And then you switch sides and do the same thing. And as you do this, more and more become aware that the air is coming from deep down inside you. All right, that same point below the navel. All right, so we do 6 of, let's do it. Why not? Why not? Okay, let's. Nice thorough exhale. Number 5, taking in the light, letting out the smoky air, all the impurities. And number 6, and then a relaxation, the hands spread wide open, and slightly bending forward, inhaling and exhaling. And again. And again. And again, a moment of relaxation, simply observing the state of the body-mind complex right now, as we are. As we are. And remain with the, as we are. Just a moment. So you'll notice that in that practice, right, we've continued to work with the body, but focusing more on the breath. We've begun to awaken an awareness of the subtle body, because we are working with the physical body and breath to access the subtle body, the chakras and the channels, right? So we've begun a crossover process again. Then we work with the voice to engage the light essence of the 5 elements, purifying and liberating the subtle dimension of this congealed energy. And that's the mantra, again from Namkhai Norbu's short tune. And I suppose we can do that too, right? Yeah. Good. It's the way I do this. How many of you actually have received this transmission and already do this practice? Okay, so several of you do. And for those of you who don't, so in order to make it a transmission, make it a real sharing of from my heart to your heart through, coming from the master, the way I do this is I sing a portion of the mantra myself, and then I gesture, and we all do it together. We just do the same thing together, and that way we get into a certain synchronicity there. Okay, right, it kind of works. And we start with that ah, and we're aware of the ah, the letter white ah at the heart chakra in a sphere of indigo light surrounded by the rainbow colors. And so that gets us into the orientation of the primordial state. And so then we do Om. And I see you're doing it with me, so do it with me, okay? Do it with me. But then when the mantra gets complicated, I think we have to do me and you, okay? All right, good. Here we go. And so our first part purifies space within and outside of us. Space, empty space, that which does not impede. Abhidhammakosha, Vasubandhu, right? That which does not impede. I'll start. Eho Shuddhe Shuddhe. And you? Eho Shuddhe Shuddhe. And then we have our green yam to purify energetic air or vayu, right, in our whole body-mind complex, inside and outside. Yam ho shuddhe shuddhe. Yam ho shuddhe shuddhe. Then we go to water element, all right, the fluidity, white, letter, the syllable is bam. Bam ho shuddhe shuddhe. Bam ho shuddhe shuddhe. The ho signifies expansion. Shuddhe comes from Sanskrit for purify, purify. Okay, purify, purify. And then we go to fire, red, and the bija, the seed syllable, ram. Ram ho shuddhe shuddhe. Ram ho shuddhe shuddhe. And then lam is the seed syllable, yellow is the color, earth is the element. Lam ho shuddhe shuddhe. Lam nice chain of all the seed syllables one after another. E am mam ram lam. Together. E am mam ram lam. And then taking them into dissolution. Shude shodanai swaha. Shude shodane swaha. Now be with that presence. All right. You're very good. We have a good choir here. Good choir. We need that. All right. So the voice. Then we're working with the capacity of the mind to create, visualize, and imagine the crossover phenomenon. You'll notice that if you know Dzogchen theory, that this tends to take the shape of an Anu Yoga practice, but it constantly goes back and forth between the Anu Maha and Ati Yoga orientations. Okay, and that's one of the beauties of this particular very simple practice that Norba Rinpoche transmits for daily use. And but the idea here is that as you are working step by step in this coarse to subtle process, you are touching upon the non-dual state, the primordial state, the kadak, the primordial pure origin and basis of all phenomena. But you touch it, you allow it to shine through as you're working in a progressive way simultaneously. So, the visualization of the letter A in a sphere of indigo blue surrounded by rainbow light is the effective visualization in this practice. So now that we have purified the elements of our body-mind complex and of the world around us through the mantra, we sound the A again, and what I tell people to do, because people coming from different traditions will have a different take on the A that is projected. Okay, so that you will be projecting the sound A and the form of the white letter A in its sphere at that height in front of you. Okay, and you're going to perceive that intentionally as whatever you consider to be most sacred. Okay, whatever you conceive of as being most sacred. All right, so there is a visualization process that connects with your own inner state. Okay, for example, for myself as a priest, of course, very often, practically always, it's the host at the moment of the elevation. Okay, so that's there, and then that and the visualization are meditated upon discursively for a few moments. In the particular tradition that we're discussing, at that time you make in silence the refuge prayer to the Guru, Deva, and Dakini, in that order: Guru, Deva, Dakini. and with the intention of benefiting all sentient beings. Okay, that's the tradition. All right, but one can work with other traditions in that same spirit, right? I mean, it's pretty simple. So let me describe the whole process, and then we can do it. So there's a first and that visualization and that refuge. Then the is allowed to be sounded as it descends into the heart. Okay, it descends into the heart and consecrates our being, and then is lifted up, offered to all the enlightened beings. Okay, so it descends and then expands, right, in that Then a third is sounded, all right, by which the enlightened beings cause to descend upon our body and to the whole world their jinlap, their blessing. Okay, and at that point, the body becomes the body of light. That's the moment in which the Anuyoga shifts and you become body of light. The fourth you don't do anything. So we're in the Ati, right? We're in the Ati Yoga, the real, the pure Dzogchen, the pristine Dzogchen, okay, phase. So, and you rest with that. You rest with that, okay? The is sounded with the head slightly tilted back, eyes open, nose and mouth free, relaxed. You sing it through nose and mouth, okay, which is part of the process of breaking down some of the, you might say, restrictions that are imposed by the bodily form itself. Right? You're slowly opening up. And breath work, crucial, breath and sound. So here we go. First, the visualization and refuge. Do it together. Second is the descent into the heart and its offering. The third is the descent of blessing and the formation or the manifestation of the light body. And the final is the pinnacle, the Ati, the openness. Just be with that. Okay. Sometimes when I pause after that practice and it's time to move on, just make a little offering of the practice, a kind of a mini offering of merit, okay, in my heart, to reach out again to those who need our kindness and support. And just for a moment do that. Good. All right. Thank you. That was very good. Very well done. You're practicing. This is a very good sign. You're doing it. Okay. So we rest in openness, vigilant, awake, conscious, but not restricted to one dimension of awareness. This is well developed in some of the parts of the writings of the Cloud of Unknowing, the author of the Cloud of Unknowing and the associated works there. In other words, you're not expecting anything, you're not forcing anything. At the same time, you're not only focusing, let's say, on a simple mindfulness analysis of phenomena in your body-mind complex. You're not necessarily working with that, okay? And and of course, the light phenomena that we're talking about here, we're preparing ourselves for experiences of the light phenomena that emerge in meditation, emerge better when you don't have intense expectations, and they also emerge better when you're open to the multidimensional qualities of the state of contemplation. All right, that is this hard to define in reality. But let's face it, when the body-mind complex is in relaxation, and when the energies, the winds of the body are focusing more and more on moving into the central channel, you do get the state of contemplation. And then as time goes on, as you do that practice, you will begin to have some experiences, maybe in dreams, or maybe during meditation sessions, in which you will begin to see this. I can remember years ago having a dream experience of the glottal stop at the throat opening and closing. Okay, did you ever have that? That was a pretty good one. Very, very, meat and potatoes, the glottal stop. But I talked to Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo. Do you know who she is? All right, the Cave in the Snow is a dear friend of mine. And she said, it's starting. Okay, it's starting to happen. In other words, you're getting the winds more and more entering the central channel, you see. So that's one of the things that starts to happen as you practice. In the Cloud of Unknowing, he's very good at the practice there is the projection of affectivity from the heart towards God. God is not conceived of as a person, all right, but as a formless presence, all right, this cloud of unknowing, this luminous cloud, and that the projection leaves open the nature and character of the relationship, you see. It doesn't predefine it, all right, with a certain kind of vocabulary or symbolism or form in particular. And so this openness of the passage between the practitioner and the divine object, all right, is open-ended, allowing, as he says, let God be God. Let God be God and not what you think God is, you see. All right, this is very, very important at this stage, right? Not to impose. There are ways, of course, as we know, as we work with our bodies, in this practice, we're aware that our bodies are a form, right? And just as you work with forms like deity images or icons or so forth, the form is leading you to a certain place. At a certain point, there are indications that you can let go of that. And the Cloud of Unknowing then tells you where to go from there. Okay? Do we know this work? The Cloud of Unknowing and the accompanying short treatises that are extremely helpful. I gave a very long series of workshops just on the discernment of stirrings, which is one 5 or 6 page part of that. But it's so rich. You can go line by line, and if you have some contemplative experience and some retreat experience, you can see very quickly what the author is getting at. Famous author, one of the most famous anonymous authors of all time. Whoever wrote that managed to conceal his or her identity. All right, great 14th century English mystics. So, moving on. In the Dzogchen tradition, we have what's called the three-line prayer, or the three key statements of Garab Dorje. And it's basically the introduction to this state, all right, of the natural state, the Neluk, the Kadak, the primordial state of contemplation. That introduction is what happens between master and disciple. Okay, it can take just a flash and a very simple gesture on the part of the master, and that's enough. Then there's removal of doubts, where we do have to do some work on ourselves. All right, removal of doubts. But it's only one line. Don't make too much out of it. It's only one line. All right, one line. Don't make too much. Very good. You're smart. And then remain in the state. Remain in the state. And if you know that beautiful song of energy that Shangchun Editions has published, let me read you a little excerpt from that. The remaining, the third line, because that's the most important. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Not remaining in doubt, continue in the state. And then this is really important, so it's worth taking a pause here and finding it. Here we go. Page, yeah, here we go. All right. Remain in the condition in which, without following whatever arises, itself liberates. Remain in the condition of the great vastness of all-pervading space. Remain in the space of the nature of existence, without concepts or limits. Remain purposeless in the completely pure condition of all existence. Remain in the space beyond observer and observed. Remain in the condition where there are no distinctions. So, remain in the condition where there is no doubt. Okay, so that having worked on the doubt, point number 2, then you get to point number 3, remain in the condition where there is no doubt. How can I not say? It sounds like Merleau-Ponty. Right? Where can we get to a point where there is, no doubt, when we really have reached ground, where there is simply no doubt. That's it. The totality of the experience that pours through every single moment of our existence, everything is there without any need to analyze it into its little bitty parts. Absolute ground. Very, very important. Very important to appreciate that. All right? To appreciate that. You might say, I like to use the image, can you dive into the tiniest space between two moments and find how vast it is? Okay? Got it. Got it. All right. So, this experience of the introduction occurs spontaneously, but it's often overlooked. Now, if we read St. John of the Cross in the ascent of Mount Carmel, he gives you, it's, I think, Book 2, Chapter 22. He goes into, remember that he's written a poem called On a Dark Night, and Una Noche Oscura. And then that poem it opens out into a commentary, line by line, very scholastic and very detailed, on the mystical experiences and their alternatives that go along with the poem. The poem is an intensely erotic encounter in the middle of the night between a young woman who goes out the back door of her village to escape from everybody and finds her lover out in the under the trees, in the wooded area outside of town, and they have this tryst. And then at the end, she goes into this total ecstatic state in the intimate union with the beloved. It's an extraordinary poem, but and many times translated, not always well. But if you know the Spanish, the 16th century Spanish, it's incredibly sensuous. So he's saying that there are signs that occur to the contemplative, all right, that indicate the dawning of an invitation to enter into pure contemplative prayer, the so-called pure prayer, which doesn't have words, at which the senses are suspended. Todos los sensos suspendidos. Very, very intense experience. In the Syriac Christian tradition, they talked about this wonder, tabha, all right, this incredible experience of wonder in which the hermit is chanting psalms in the middle of the night, in the dark, right, in the dark, chanting the psalms, and they stop all of a sudden, and you just have to stop. You have to stop. There's this pause, all right, and that is what they considered the dawning of pure prayer, the dawning of pure prayer. The problem, if we want to find a problem, the problem has been that this pure prayer may begin in short bursts and may never entirely supplant other forms of prayer and meditation, even if it becomes the predominant form for some very lucky person, all right, the predominant form of spiritual awareness in a particular person's life stream. It is almost always interwoven or blended with activities of daily life that, however, usually need to become fewer and simpler, right? St. Teresa of Avila said, I finding God among the pots and pans, all right? I told Sharon that I like to wash my dishes by hand, to feel them, right? To feel them. I mean, again, there's this connecting with the ordinary that opens out into the extraordinary, you see. At a higher level, though, some meditators expand their activities greatly, okay? And that also happens, okay? Through ongoing practice, without clinging or artificially constructing the contemplative state, we recognize the presence of that state, first in meditation sessions and then at other times. There is an increasing conviction that one is being guided, that the entire crossover process is a gift given for the benefit of others who may not be conscious of the significance of the crossover for the consciousness process at the heart of the cosmic unfolding. All right, this is really important. In other words, it is possible not only to engage this crossover, right, between the coarse and the subtle, it is also simultaneously possible to be connecting with a much bigger process that's going on far beyond the confines of this planet. Okay, the really wonderful insights of David Germano, teaching at the University of Virginia on the history of Dzogchen, and in his great big fat dissertation, the shift in the development of Dzogchen philosophy from a karma-driven universe, right? In other words, a universe in which both good and evil produce enduring effect and come to fruition generation after generation, lifetime after lifetime, right, is transfigured, is illuminated from within by the contemplative state, which manifests through the introduction to the state, removal of doubt, and then remaining in the state, okay, so that karma-driven becomes gnosis-driven. All right, that's the term he uses, right? That the point of departure of everything is profound knowledge, and the point of arrival is profound knowledge. Now, in Evagrius of Pontus, one of the great desert fathers of the 4th century, who was the you might say the man behind the Syro-Oriental Christian tradition, he also says God is essential gnosis, and the whole process is designed to return to that primordial gnosis. It's there in the 4th century in Greek, translated into Syriac, passed across Central Asia, becomes the inspiration for a gigantic. Do we know how large the Syro-Oriental Church was? It wasn't as big as the Manichees, but it was everywhere. It was everywhere. And many of the Mongol tribes became Christians through this contemplative outreach. They had monks, and they also had itinerant bishops. The bishops didn't have a cathedral; they had a tent. All right, and you moved with the nomads. Okay, you moved with the nomads, and that was how it worked. There may have been 6 of these in Tibet. There were certainly many of them across Central Asia. I think I've given you a map. You can get an idea. So when we talk about Turfan and Dunhuang, Merv, even from Qatar and Mesopotamia, Nisibis in Persia, all the way to China, where there is this wonderful encounter from the 640s all the way to the 780s between these Syro-Oriental Christians and the great civilization of Tang China, and the production of extraordinary Christian Buddhist sutras, okay, that maybe some of you have read about. And in the book there's a translation and commentary of perhaps the most extraordinary of them all, the book on the realization of profound peace and joy, by Jing, who was probably a core bishop of the Syro-Oriental Church in the Chinese capital, who was buddies with, and I say buddies, Prajna, who was a Central Asian Buddhist monk, who at the time didn't know Chinese very well, so he worked with Jing, who was good at Chinese, to translate a Buddhist Mahayana Sutra on the 6 paramitas. The Buddhist Translation Bureau and the emperor criticized this translation as not being accurate enough. All right, so they had to go back to the drawing board. But later, Prajna got good enough at classical Chinese to be able to translate the entire Avatamsaka Sutra, which, if you know the Cleary translation, is in 3 or 4 volumes. I mean, it's a big thing. It's one of the most important Chinese Buddhist works, right? The great jewel net of Indra, describing the interconnectivity of all things down to the most microscopic to the most macroscopic dimensions, right? And then in the great Gandavyuha portion, the Manjushri guides his disciple, was it Suddhodana, to go from one master to the other, and there are masters of all sorts of religious traditions, castes, both men and women, and he's supposed to study with all of these masters in order to be ready for full enlightenment. Okay, it's an extraordinary work, and that was translated by Prajna. That's part of the Chinese Buddhist canon. But that's not enough, because Prajna translated esoteric Buddhist works as well, with the help of I've forgotten the name, but there was an Indian tantric master in the Chinese capital at the time teaching, and they worked together. And if that wasn't enough, the great Kukai, Kobodaishi, the founder of the Shingon lineage in Japan, is there at the same time and studied Sanskrit with Prajna. Wow. Okay? So the 780s in China were pretty intense. Really something. I think not until our present day, to what we as far as we know, not until the present day has there been so much intercontemplative dialogue going on at a very high level. All right? So that is one of the things that's in that book, and I try to bring it out, and there's a great deal more that could be done on just this one area, and how we were fortunate enough at Dunhuang to find some of these texts. The syncretic Buddhist Christian works, the original Dzogchen works, the Chinese Christian works were found there in extraordinarily good condition. If you went to the of course, we're not in New York anymore. we're in Washington. But at the Rubin Museum in New York, there was a wonderful show of the Dunhuang materials, including paintings on silk, and most extraordinary medical manuscripts. And if you look up Sam Van Schaik, Schaik, earlytibet.com, he's got a lot on this. He's one of the world's experts at the British Library on the Dunhuang manuscripts. So that's a whole world that has opened us up to a completely new understanding of the roots of Dzogchen in the Tantric Buddhism transmitted to Tibet in the imperial period. Okay, and there's so much more. But anyway, going back to our series of steps here, remember the title of that wonderful book by Kennard Lippmann translating a Longchenpa text, "You are the eyes of the world." Okay? You are the eyes of the world. I mean, this is, in one line, a description of this gnosis, this primordial gnosis. All right? So that when we awaken to what we are, we awaken to what we are. So all preparatory work in this system is designed to open up that which is already there, rather than plant something there that wasn't there before. Okay? This is very, very important. Even the coarse elements are not really coarse in their essence. So we are disclosing that which is there. We are disclosing that which is there. Now, in the book, I talked about the problem that Milarepa ran into. And you see this in the Liberation in One Lifetime book, and then I discuss it in the second chapter of the Rainbow Body and Resurrection book. Here you have Milarepa, very famous story, right? His crimes, right? And the crimes of Milarepa, why? His mother threatens to commit suicide if he doesn't take vengeance on the wicked relatives, okay? In Italian we have an expression, parenti serpenti. Okay. Parenti serpenti. Oh, we're with a psychologist, excuse me. Right? Parenti serpenti. Your relatives are serpents. Snakes. Okay? So, how well we know from hours on the couch, right? So, parenti serpenti. So, you have a lot there, inside. Poor Milarepa is there, and he's got this bunch of serpenty, the uncle and the aunt and all the other relatives and the villagers and so on and so forth. So he goes off and he studies with the two magical teachers. And remember, the first one gives them a few magic tricks that they can do. And then Milarepa says, after a year, in tears, this isn't going to do it. Right? Okay, yeah, I know. I can see you're in real trouble. So, all right, go down and visit my Bunpo friend down the road. And then the Bunpo teaches him about the hail flinging magic and the death magic. All right? And so he does the mantras. Now, he's a teenager, and he does it with the son of the master in a little cubicle shaped in the form of a triangle, right? So it's wrathful deity invocations. And then he plants the amulets in the ground where it's going to be attracting the hail, and he launches the various wrathful entities against the pillar of the house. Remember, if you've ever been, I saw a house just like this in Kakbeni near Muktinath in northern Nepal, where there's just one pole holding up the first floor there, all right? And so the animals bang against that, and down comes the house, and down comes the wedding party, okay? This is the end of a great many of the Parenti Serpenti. And then to punish the neighborhood, who were, who didn't do a thing to lift a finger to help Milarepa, his mother and sister, and after the death of his father, he launches 9 years of hailstorms against their barley crop. Okay, so this is Milarepa awakening to his powers as a young man. He had previously been considered something of a no-good Nobody. Even his mother says as much. But then, because he's done this now, he's really everybody's enemy. And according to a couple of accounts, he may have spent a number of years doing this kind of activity as a sorcerer. And then he has the visionary experiences of the wrathful deities reminding him that he has a debt with them. And then he begins to realize that that debt can only be paid at great length. Right? At great length. And so he goes and tries to find a spiritual teacher who can liberate him in one body, in one lifetime. All right? He goes to Lagadriston, who is in the lineage of the great Dzogchen, pristine Dzogchen tradition. And Laga says, oh, if you practice my Dharma in the morning, by evening, you'll be a Buddha. If you practice my Dharma in the evening, by morning, you'll be a Buddha. No problem. Milarepa practices and falls asleep. And falls asleep. He's got a lot of stuff to deal with. Okay? And so Laga says, oh, I guess I underestimated the karmic burden that you're running around with. Okay. All right. Not a good sign. So, okay, maybe you need somebody else to teach you. You notice that the original magic teachers could not teach him. All right. They too were a little concerned about their own fate, and could not transmit the path to final liberation to Milarepa. So Laga says, well, there's Marpa of Lodrak, who has come back from India with all kinds of teachings, so we need to go there, but I'm too old, I can hardly walk, so you go and study with Marpa. Now, what does this tell us? I think it tells us, I mean, all stories of great figures like this are emblematic. It's not just a private conversation. This is emblematic. This is emblematic of a problematic moment in the history of Dzogchen in Tibet. Because already we have a long history of Dzogchen masters, mostly Nakpas, that is, lay practitioners, right? Transmitting the pristine pristine Dzogchen teachings, along with a whole plethora of rituals, many of which were wrathful, many of which involved this kind of destructive magic, okay? And there were also the earlier Nyingma Tantras, being like the Guyagarbha, right, that were being transmitted, and the 17 Tantras of early Dzogchen. This is the period in which, though, they begin to realize that there are many people who cannot do these practices. They are not karmically prepared. But there's something there. And anyway, if the theory is correct, they should be able to practice from where they are and what they are. So they have to, they're encountering a challenge coming from two sides. This is called the second diffusion, remember, of Buddhism, which first of all was with the king of Gugye in western Tibet and Rinchen Zangpo, who was his religious advisor. And then Atisha comes in. And they develop a monastic reform. They reform tantric practice. They reform the whole relationship between state and institutional Buddhism. And that's one form, and it gives rise to the Kadampa order, all right? All right, the rigorous monastic practice, meditation, and scholasticism, but also a reform of tantric practice. But then there are people like Marpa, and he wasn't the only one, who are bringing in the more Mahasiddha, the wilder, the more freewheeling yogic and tantric practices of northern India that they directly received in Nepal and in India from various masters such as Naropa, Tilopa, Maitripa, and so forth and so on. So that there's a whole new approach to Buddhist Tantra coming in from India at this time, probably even more strongly influenced by Kashmir Shaivism, right? This is the era of Abhinavagupta, the pinnacle of Kashmir Shaivism, right, who was active around the year 1000. the same period of time in which Rinchen Zangpo and his companions studied in Kashmir, all right, to transmit reformed Buddhist Tantra to Western Tibet. I mean, we're not talking about great distances here, okay? So they knew one another and they knew what was going on. The Nyingma tradition naturally would want to say, we have it all. What's the problem? All right? But they realized that to adapt Dzogchen to the disciples who were presenting themselves was also crucial at this time. Because they didn't have the preliminary practices, they didn't have the Anuttara Yoga Tantras that were coming into Tibet at that time. And so you begin to develop an approach that takes its great flowering in the work of Longchenpa in the 14th century. But from the 11th to the 14th centuries, a lot of time goes by, right? A great deal goes on. The first termas emerge at the beginning of this period. The life of Garab Dorje that I translated emerges in this period. The redaction of the 17 tantras into more or less consistent scriptural works takes place in this period. Okay, what they call the supreme source, the Kunje Gyalpo text, that's very famous. The king creator of all, which is of course about the primordial mind, that emerges in this period as a consistent work. So a great deal of work is going on to preserve the earliest Dzogchen teachings in ways that can effectively compete with the Anuttara Yoga Tantras and the monastic reforms going on at the same time in Tibet. All right? So this explains to us why down through the ages the termas continually play with Anu, Maha, and Ati yogas. There's a continual recycling of these practices so that disciples will enter the experience at appropriate moments in appropriate ways given their predispositions. In early Dzogchen, if you read the Eye of the Storm, Keith Dowman's translation, you will see there isn't much room for a three-part analysis of disciples, the most capable, the middling, and the least capable. It's just there. Boom. Meditate my way this morning, by evening you're a Buddha. That's it, right? But later on we get the threefold pattern, which, by the way, is also in Evagrius of Pontus in the 4th century, just as a footnote. Okay, I mean, he himself said the whole reason for esotericism in our kind of Christianity is because, not that we have something to hide, it's that people aren't capable. So you give the teachings in a manner that corresponds to the capacity of disciples. Now this is a shibboleth for Tibetan Buddhism. They say this all the time. I mean, I don't think there's a single lineage today that doesn't say that. But it was not said in pristine Dzogchen. It was not said. Okay, so I don't want to... All right. So you can see that that was a crucial moment, and it plays into my argument about possible influences and cross and exchange in the historical process of Dzogchen and the Second Diffusion. Okay, but anyway.
Is that when Togao was also there?
Yes, there's no mention of Togao before this period, you see. So now, let me tell you something, because then we're getting into these higher and more subtle levels now. I'm making the claim that in this kind of process, you gradually do become more sensitive and more aware of what's going on inside of you. All right, so that certain phenomena of light begin to emerge during your meditation practice at various times. This may happen spontaneously. This may happen sometimes in an encounter with an extraordinary teacher. Any kind of sets of circumstances, because it's very individual. Even on Sunday in New York, one of the participants shared pretty much exactly the same unfolding with everybody in the group, and he said, I had this. I didn't think anybody else ever had it, so I never told anybody this, but I'm going to tell you, that this is exactly what happened to me. The sphere of violet light starts out malleable and kind of out of control. It has a golden glow to it, a golden quality with that violet light. As time goes on, you get it under more and more control. It becomes more spontaneously present as you do your practices. And then you can continue to work with it because it is effectively the winds going into the central channel and the purification of the chakras in a gradual and gentle manner, right? Not some wacko thumpo from the bottom up kundalini explosion, s'il vous plaît, but something that happens. I've worked with people. I'm laughing, but it's not so funny when you have somebody who's had a premature awakening and can be very devastating. So we're doing gentle. All right, Tai Chi. We're doing Qigong. Buddhism here. So what's important here is that you begin to notice it, and if possible, of course, you have some Dharma friends, along the way with whom you can share these things and get some guidance. Because it is useful to have guidance. It's useful to go into retreat. It's useful to make some connection with a Sangha in order to really feel secure as you move forward. So, setting aside artificial efforts, one recognizes the state of contemplation and the true nature of reality as being simply present. Okay, simply present. This is the reason, if one can say so, for the existence itself of the cosmos. This is the purpose. This is the kingdom of God. This is liberation. This is enlightenment. This is what we are. Okay. So, working with the nature of things as they are, we can gradually access deeper states of awareness that are not restricted to a notion of a self separate from phenomena in general. There is no need to restrict enlightenment to one set of experiences in one body-mind complex. There is development, unfolding, further growth. Gregory of Nyssa called this epictasis. That is the ongoing, boundless growth in love. All right, there's an expansion. Think of the nature of a biological cell, inner and outer, tension and relaxation, self and other. It goes on like that. In experiences of non-localized awareness, such as in dark retreat, or in deep contemplative prayer, we discover a cessation of the train of distracted thoughts that awakens as wonder, or samadhi. This opens up developments in non-localized consciousness, which may also be called the non-dual state. It's the basis for miracles of various kinds. The spread of samadhi into the cells is the basis for the dissolution of the material body, as we have in the Tamil Siddha tradition as well as in the Dzogchen traditions. All right. So in Tamil Siddha practice, what they do is you awaken the inner experience of light by working with visualizations of solar light at the heart chakra. And they work with the syllable Om a great deal. Okay. Do you know Tirumulai? The work of Tirumulai from the probably 8th century, where, again, great 8th century, who wrote these magnificent poems in Tamil about this practice. And then what happens is from the heart chakra, gradually, little suns go out into the cells. Okay? Okay? Got it? Conflagration. But bit by bit. It's like, antibodies coming from the heart and passing through the capillaries, okay? So that your body fills with light. All right? That's really important. So when we're talking about crossover here, you can see why we've taken this route of purifying the elements, working with light, working with the mind, working with chanting. You're preparing the body for this process of conflagration or distribution, okay? If you look at the paintings in the Lukang temple in Lhasa, do we know about this temple? The serpent god temple. When they built the Potala, they had to move a lot of soil in order to, because to build up the walls, they put soil behind the concrete, like adobe. And so they got the soil from behind the potala. That created a huge cavity. And the rains would come and fill up the cavity. So it became an artificial lake. And in the middle, there's an island. Right? So they turned it into a park. It's a beautiful island with a park-like atmosphere all around the lake. On the island in the lake, to pacify the Nagas, whose life had been disturbed by removing the soil, they constructed this temple. In the temple, probably the great fifth Dalai Lama and his prime minister, Sangye, what was his name, the prime minister, the famous, the fellow who became the regent. So while the fifth Dalai Lama was mummified, he would do the ventriloquism to give the orders. You remember this? At the end of the 1600s? The great fifth, I mean, he had created the modern Tibetan state. He built the potala. He was a great mystic and Terton himself. When he died, it would have been a calamity for the state. And so they mummified him in the lotus position. And so he's behind these veils, right? And the prime minister would do the ventriloquism of giving the orders. That's true. And the prime minister had this temple built, and following the practices of this great Dalai Lama. If you find the book from Serindia Publications, the secret visions of the Dalai Lama, you have some of his inner experiences, which then were turned into actual ritual practices that he did to protect and unify the Tibetan state. And then in the Dalai Lama's secret temple, Ian Baker and his associate have the photos of this temple. And at the Rubin Museum in New York, there is a complete 3/4 size reproduction in one of the galleries of the Lukang. So you can see, and it's very interesting that here you have the great fifth Dalai Lama, but in those paintings, the Terton is Pema Lingpa, who was the founder of the Bhutanese state in the 15th century. Now, he's depicted finding termas underwater and in caves, and so many of the representations reflect the terma tradition, being brought to its, really ultimate conclusion with a depiction of Tibetan medical practice and analysis of the body-mind complex, along with Yantra Yoga, the 6 yogas of Naropa, and the Dzogchen Trekchot and Togel practices. Okay? It's all there. It's an extremely valuable record. And the inscriptions were translated by Ian Baker in that book. So this shows us what is seen, right? You're in the contemplative state. You're in dark retreat. These visionary experiences emerge spontaneously. Now, some of them look like spheres, all right, our little tigles, or, these little spheres of light. Some of them are joined together on a thread, or they're serpent-like, all right? So these visionary experiences indicate that a transformation is occurring. They are symptoms of a process, right? They are symptoms of a process by which the energy is being transmitted to the cells. The crossover is taking place between practice and transformation, right? This is why the study of the rainbow body is, it's more than just a study of a paranormal phenomenon. All right, it really is a way for us to get into what goes on when we're doing spiritual practice, whether that is laboratory alchemy or hatha yoga or visualization, anuttara yoga tantra, Eucharistic practices in the Christian tradition. All of these things, all of them bring on, you might say, a flood of inner changing energies going on inside the body-mind complex. Okay, and it is interesting that the Syro-Oriental Christians and the Cloud of Unknowing both talk about heat phenomena and light phenomena, right? And warn us to be careful with this, that you need to work with it carefully. They're very, very cautious. But it is interesting that in one of the texts of Buddhist yoga found at the Turfan Oasis, it's called the Yoga Vidya or Yoga Vidya book. This book is in fragments, is in tatters, but the Sanskrit that is translatable has been translated into German, and it describes things like rays of light coming from the Ushnisa, the swollen part of the cranium on top of a Buddha or Bodhisattva, and then that descends into the mind-body complex of the meditator. And they refer to sapphire light, which is also referred to by Evagrius and all of his heirs. And that goes back to Exodus, right? Exodus 20, where the elders of Israel ascend and are given that vision of the sapphire light. So there are many very interesting connections. Whether they are indirect connections or direct connections, there's something in common going on. They're discovering things about what it is to be a human being, all right, and what goes on in the crossover process between matter and energy. Okay? So, having purified the gross elements many times in retreat and in daily practice, where presence encounters wonder and experiences of spontaneous light, one actualizes the body of light. This is the victory over death, immortality, known in the incorrupt saints, and also in saints such as Milarepa, who experienced the bardo before dying. In my translation of the Gautangpa biography of Milarepa, for example, he's making a retreat, and the crisis of this crossover is presented in great detail, where he goes blind, he goes deaf, he seems to be undergoing snow blindness, the senses really kind of break down, all right, and there are intense floods of energy inside the body. It's described like the breaking of a dam, okay? Taisitupa, actually, and I didn't get this directly from him, but I got it from disciples of Taisitupa. The whole notion of the chakras themselves are like gummed up pipes, okay, and they have to be purified, and when they do, the energy can flow more freely, okay. It's a very, very important process, and it can be quite difficult. This is why you need the support and the guidance, and this is why there are the upadeshas, the oral teachings, usually written down as short pechas that the yogis take into the cave, into the meditation hut, to guide them as they go along. But you see, in a biography like the one that I translated here, even a biography of Milarepa will give you those teachings, all right, in terms of what he went through. Therefore, you shouldn't be surprised when it starts happening to you, okay? Don't be dismayed, okay? Even at a fairly early stage in the process, the light phenomena appear in front of the eyes, closed or open, in the form of a sphere, sometimes malleable, violet color mixed with sparkles of gold, something like phosphenes on the retina of the eye, but not the same, because there is no physical stimulation of the retina. Okay? This sphere is a sign that the subtle winds are entering the central channel. With time, the sphere stabilizes in the central channel, remains near the heart chakra. From there, it spreads spontaneously to the various parts of the body via pathways in the coarse body and the subtle body. So nadis as well as arteries. Okay? Now, this is important. Milarepa, in one of the oral teachings translated in the Liberation book, describes a karma mudra practice done by visualization. Karma mudra, of course, is sexual yoga. Okay, so he describes the visualization of the consort at the heart chakra as a method for bringing the winds into the central channel. Okay, so here you're working with affectivity and eros to bring the winds into the central channel and help them stabilize there. And he describes that quite well in that practice. That can be done. The person who most dear to you, you place there, and that is very, very effective. It helps stabilize the sphere. It becomes less amoebic and really begins to abide in the central channel. Another thing that you can do is you take the corpse asana, all right, lie down flat, but move your hand to the Ajna chakra here, all right, and place gentle pressure on the Ajna chakra while you're lying down flat, and you will help stabilize the sphere of light. Okay, all right. And another hatha yoga practice that is very good for then distributing this energy is, once you're pretty good with that, you can do the candle, the flame, the shoulder stand, and if you can hold it for a couple of minutes, or at least a minute and a half, you're allowing the prana to descend into the area of your throat chakra, which, by the way, is the dream and voice chakra. Okay, Milarepa really works with this because he's the great singer, right? The singer of tales, par excellence. So it goes into that area. But you will notice, if you begin to get with your eyes closed, you're seeing the sphere of light. You can gradually observe it spreading into the rest of your body. And a sign that this is working is that the violet light seems to spread out, and there are little sparkles, okay, in the field, in this open field, okay, of light inside your body, okay. That's one way of seeing it, all right, and it does seem to correspond to other people's experience, so that it is starting to move out into the rest of your body, okay. In dark retreat, in the Todgal practices, it gradually, you see the luminosity of the cells being enhanced through those visionary experiences. And so you see mandalas, bubbles, snakes, rosaries, and so on, as in the Lukang images. We were told by Khenpo Acha's Dharma brother, who was called Lama Akyung, okay, who is the head of the Yache Gompa, which is one of the two big Gompas that recently are being partly demolished. Have you read about this on the web? There's one much bigger, his name I've forgotten, and then the Yache Gompa also was. The Chinese government is very concerned that these centers are attracting thousands of practitioners, lay and monastic, and so they've begun to demolish a percentage of the buildings and causing a great deal of dismay. But anyway, this particular master, we met him in 2000 in the context of the interviews of the various eyewitnesses to the dissolution of the body of Khenpo Acha, and he gave us a number of interesting teachings and observations. But when he died in 2008, his body shrunk down to about this size. Okay, and that relic is preserved. And that's part of this relic tour that's been going around since 2010 with some of the different ring cell and other manifestations. So he told us, that this would happen, and it did. He showed us two photographs of himself taken in the dark, and one was of his body glowing. All right, there was a rim of glow all around the body. The second photograph showed his body triplicated, one semi-coincident with the other, like a Venn diagram, and each one radiating light and rays of light coming out. And that photo can be seen on a website, which I wrote down someplace. But anyway, there's a couple of websites that actually show the photo, which has now been adorned with a lotus underneath it. There was no photo in the original. There's a lotus image. But the original photo was, I held those two in my hand. The real awful thing about that moment was, I have the photos in my hands. He threw us out for about 10 minutes while he had to talk to somebody else. And I'm holding the photos, and sunset is upon us. And I don't have, I had a analog camera. I didn't have a digital camera with me, and I couldn't take the picture because my film wasn't fast enough to do this in that dim light. But it is on the web, so my failure has been made up for by somebody else who put this in the shrine where this particular master's relic is preserved. So you can see that we're not only talking about a metaphor here. And this is the eternal problem in all of the writings about light. The Greek word for baptismal illumination is photismos. All right, and photismos means you see light. That something happens. And this is, of course, adult baptism during the Easter Vigil in the night, in the dark. And so the early Christians knew this, right? But nowadays we baptize the baby in broad daylight, and who knows what the baby's experiencing? Maybe they are experiencing light, but they're not telling us, right? But I have had people, though, adult confirmation candidates whom I was given permission to confirm in the Archdiocese of San Francisco. I'm not a bishop, but they gave me the authority, and they did have experiences like this. So something does happen. There's a transmission. When I was ordained to the priesthood, I haven't told this to anybody before. I'm just a couple of close friends. Since you're all very good, I'll tell you. Like the Pirates of Penzance, right? We're very, very good, and be it understood. So, anyway, what happened is the bishop, who was an extraordinary man, really, who was interested in this kind of material very much, studied world religions at Fordham. When he placed his hands on my head in the classic essential ritual gesture of the transmission of apostolic succession to me as a presbyter, as a priest, my entire body, from the crown of my head to the groin, filled with a standing wave of energy. It was very stable and very solid. Very stable and very solid. All right, and that remained for most of the rest of the ceremony. Okay, that was really very powerful. We're talking about Shaktipat, this particular bishop, who is deceased now, Ettore di Filippo, was here in New York for 17 years at the United Nations, and then he was made a bishop in Italy, and so I had been working with him in the non-governmental sector in New York, and then he ordained me to the priesthood. And I'm very grateful, and I want to honor his memory by telling that story. He appeared to me once in a dream while I was doing research in Nepal, and he had on a black cassock, but it wasn't a normal black cassock. The sleeves had this elaborate embroidering, all in black. It was kind of like what we see the embroidering on a tanka border, So when I got back to Italy, I said to him, Ettore, I saw you in a dream. Oh, really? Ettore, you were wearing a very special cassock. Oh, really? Davvero? Yeah, it had all this embroidering on it. Oh, yeah, I got that in China. How do you like that? All right. Yeah, pretty amazing people out there. They're out there. So anyway, Kenpo, Lama Akyu, told us it would take about 60 years to bring this process to its completion. As a 60-year process. He said, you want to be my disciple? Come here and you can do it. I said, well, I don't know if the Chinese government would be exactly thrilled to have this crazy American priest, wandering around eastern Tibet. And he agreed. But then a few weeks later, I had that experience of boiling over with rage. And somebody on Sunday told me about the same thing happening to them. Boiling over with absolutely irrational rage, and then, boom, like an explosion going on inside, in which all the anger and all the rage and all the motivations for that anger and rage suddenly just exploded into microscopic pieces. You've had this. And I was in this non-localized, non-dual state until the end of September. So it's about the Transfiguration, 6th of August to the end of September. And that was amazing. That was really, and I attribute that to the blessing of Lama Akyung, who realized I couldn't be his disciple for 60 years, but gave me the blessing anyway. All right? It's, very wonderful stuff. These people are really something. So, anyway, let's just wrap it up. I just want to make a comment here. Dream yoga and bardo practices, okay, can enhance all of this as well. Glenn Mullen gives a very interesting Dakini teaching on the white and red drops meeting up here while you're doing kumbhaka practice, the pot breathing. You enhance it by moving the arms in a tense posture up while doing the visualization and holding your breath. And then when they join, the red and white drops kiss and melt in warmth and love and fill the whole body, and you lower your arms. Okay. So if you know kumbhaka practice, you can enhance kumbhaka with this visualization. The white, of course, is the male. The red is the female. Their union, all right, is what we are, right? And that descends into the central channel and spreads to the whole body. And that's a very effective, that he teaches that as a preparatory practice for dream yoga. So for clear, night dreaming. But it is also, it's meant as a way to balance male and female energies in the body-mind complex. But it is also very good for enhancing this. Okay? So, I talked a lot. If you have some questions, and because we were also going to talk about all kinds of things, phenomenology and therapy, and Lord knows. But there's room and time, I think, right? I also made a number of copies of the quotations, not all of which are to be found in the book, that I felt were helpful for this discussion, but I only made 16 copies. So you're welcome to have those of you who are looking to go deeper. If we run out of copies, I can always email you the attachment, okay? And I think I even did my dramatization of the Song of the Pearl from the Gnostic, Manichaean, Central Asian traditions, which we did on Sunday, and it's fun, and you might want to do it as a group sometime. Okay? So, but all of that can be sent as attachments if you wish. Okay? So, I'm tempted to read the Gerard Manley Hopkins poem on the resurrection to end off, and then you could. But then let me have the Rainbow Body book, and then I hope you do have some questions, and then I get your feedback. You're already giving me huge amounts of feedback, and I was seeing the lights spinning when we hit number 3. So congratulations. You are very, very good, and be it understood. All right. Gerard Manley Hopkins, right? Young Jesuit, 19th century wild man, reinventing English poetry. Man, how fast his fire dint, his mark on mind is gone. Both are in an unfathomable, all is in an enormous dark drowned. Oh, pity and indignation! Man-shape that shone sheer off, disseveral, a star, death, blots black out. Nor mark is any of him so stark. But vastness blurs, and time beats level. Enough! The resurrection! A heart's clarion. Away, griefs gasping, joyless days, dejection. Across my foundering deck shone a beacon, an eternal beam. Flesh fade, and mortal trash fall to the residuary worm. World's wildfire leave but ash. In a flash, at a trumpet crash, I am all at once what Christ is, since he was what I am. And this jack joke, poor potsherd, patch, matchwood, immortal diamond is immortal diamond. And you are. And you are.
We have some time for questions, huh? Whatever, statements, whatever. Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for being here. And you really speak as you write, and you write as you speak, which is really unique and amazing. I had a question about reincarnation and spheres and light, and just speak to that. Like almost witnessing reincarnation.
It's a question about reincarnation.
Sure, a question about reincarnation. If someone is pregnant and sees light, and any thoughts on that? I'm trying to not be so specific.
Okay, that's a darn good question, actually. And first, let me thank you about the comment about writing and speaking. I'm sure it disconcerted my copy editor to no end, and there are a lot of mistakes in the book because the copy editor thought that I was making lots of mistakes when I was not making mistakes at all. But anyway, that happens. That happens. In fact, if you find mistakes in the book, that are really obvious, let me know, and I'm trying to prepare a corrected edition. But now, I keep hinting that I want to hear from my mother what happened when she was pregnant, but she won't tell. She's keeping it a secret. But I do know that we were talking about this last night about people staying in the womb longer than the 9 months. As if there were things to be dealt with in that way. I stayed in there 2 weeks, and then they did a cesarean. My poor mom, which she never lets me forget. But if you just have to imagine here. Not only are we dealing with the mind-body complex of one person, but of another person. Okay, and so the interaction going on, at that part of the body, right? We're talking about the uterus, so the base of the whole structure of the body, and even the question of one's identity is extremely profound. This is why in Hinduism especially, there are the different samskaras that are performed, the rituals that are performed at the different stages of pregnancy, all right, in order to acknowledge the development of the child within the womb. We have so many accounts in Tibetan hagiography of miraculous and unusual signs occurring during pregnancy, including rainbows, all right, including rainbows and dreams. In the older Milarepa biography that I translated, we have accounts of the mother's dreams, all of which presage the difficulties in life that Milarepa would have to encounter. And she is the one who is experiencing them. It's quite important, actually. I gave a paper about that, and it's Wendy Danziger who really appreciated that paper on pregnancy dreams. And my friend Serenity Young has written about dream experiences as well. It's called Dreaming the Lotus, and her book definitely merits attention. Not only because she mentions me. I have a saying. There's a couple of sayings, right? One of the sayings that I'm sure you all know. You can tell a person is intelligent because they agree with me. Right? Right? There's no talk about no doubts, right? And the other, a person can do no wrong if they quote you in their book. They are absolved of all faults. Works better than the Vajrasattva mantra. Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all this amazing information. I have a comment and then a question. The comment is that I found it very thrilling for you to say that the intercontemplative dialogue that's going on now is as strong as it was in the 700s, and that I think what you were saying was that it hasn't happened in that way until now. That's a comment. The second is maybe a strange, crazy question. But in all that you describe, I'm wondering where and how you would explain evangelical Christians who see the Bible as a concrete reality and are very earnest and very devout, and yet seem so so angry and intolerant in this world that you describe.
There are always going to be people who disagree, as we noticed even with when Prajna and Jing were translating that.
We're going to do this not quite working.
All right. Where they were when Prajna and Jing were translating the 6 Paramitas Mahayana Sutra, they were criticized rather severely by the Sangha, by the Buddhist Sangha, for doing this. And there was a memorandum sent to the emperor, don't let them do this anymore, only Buddhists should translate Buddhist texts, and blah, 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 blah. But as it turned out, Prajna really needed that experience to become one of the great translators of, in Chinese history. Today, we have this problem, which is, let's face it, it's always connected with social problems and perspective, political and social issues that people are going through. And so naturally the intensity with which a person attaches himself or herself to a group that hold a certain view is connected to the degree to which they feel deeply threatened by circumstances. So the compassionate approach to this is certainly not to shove things down people's throats and make them feel even more, uncomfortable. When I worked for the Bishops' Conference from 2004 to 2009 here in Washington, I made strenuous efforts to make sure that all of our dialogues were explained in theologically meaningful terms to the Catholic community and also to our ecumenical Christian partners. And I worked very closely also with ISNA and ICNA, the 2 great Muslim umbrella organizations here in America, to try to open up the field of conversation and make sure that it was handled in ways that would be recognizable to the people we were claiming to represent, okay, instead of going off on a tangent. Now here we can be a little freer, and it's a different kind of conversation, it's a different kind of Sangha experience, all right? But when you're out there working with large religious organizations with a great variety of people, one has to be very sensitive. So in the case of evangelical, interesting. At the National Council of Churches, which tends to be prevalently progressive, all right, I'm sitting there on the board as an observer, participant, invited, and there is a bishop from the Assemblies of God, which is really Pentecostal more than evangelical, and the 2 of us are making common cause to encourage the brothers and sisters around the table to articulate their views about interreligious relations, because that's the commission is for, articulate our views on interreligious relations in biblical terms, so as not to lose, all right, the other communities that would speak primarily in biblical terms about anything and want to hear theological articulations that reflect that understanding, that the Bible is God's word, that it communicates truth, that it needs to be listened to carefully and interpreted with attention to the original revelation that it represents, which is exactly the same situation with our Muslim partners, because they take the Quran as literally the word of God, that Prophet Muhammad wrote down, right, what he heard. Right? He's not a composer. He didn't compose, at least according to Muslim belief, he didn't compose the Quran. He wrote down what he heard. All right, hear, take and hear. And this is, one has to respect the theological parameters of the community with which you're in dialogue. All right. Now, then, as time goes on, other conversations happen, you might say, in the corridors, right? Where all the excitement really happens, where you talk heart to heart. This is why I used to try to take a day extra. I used to get criticized for this because it costs a little extra money, blah, 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 blah. But the fact of the matter is that an extra day in private with an imam over a cup of mint tea is going to get you an awful lot more results than, hollering and screaming or sitting around a table and reading a polite paper. Okay, so I used to do that, and I believe that that is a very effective form of dialogue, sustaining dialogue. All right, so we do this with anyone we can find, and we did try to work with a broad spectrum of Protestant groups, including evangelicals, and even we were opening up to Mormons, which for the Catholic Church is pretty amazing, in those years. And I think they've kept that up. So the idea here is to respect the theological perspectives of your partner and to make statements that are recognizable to your own constituency and that of the other. All right, basic principle.
Thank you for doing all that.
Yeah, it was a big job. There are things on the website now. For a while, the website was in a state of chaos, but now all of the press releases and the important agreements and documents of those years are up there, along with everything they've done since I went back to Italy. And my successor has continued the project on interreligious education, so that Muslims will be teaching about Catholics in ways recognizable to Catholics, and Catholics will be teaching about Muslims in ways recognizable to Muslims. Mm-hmm. Grazie.
One more question.
The practice that you led us through using the Bija mantras, is that in the book?
It's in the handout that I gave. It's in the front.
Okay. Starting with Yam and then going to Vam.
Well, it starts with
And A. Okay, so it is there. Okay. I just wanted to ask because it seems to be not in order in terms of the chakras. There seems to be an intention that it's not in progressive order in the body.
It doesn't correspond with the colors of the rainbow as they are.
That's what I'm, yes.
But that's how it's transmitted by Norbert Rinpoche.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you very much.
So it's about 12 o'clock. So glad to have you here. This is home. We love having you here so much. And we're going to be here also Friday. And Friday we're going to have at the regular meditation. I think you'll be teaching, again, more practices of the light during the meditation. Everybody's welcome to come to that. We'll also be online. And then Sunday we'll have another 2-hour set. Oh, more than that, from 10 to 1. And I think we'll be focusing on some of the Christian traditions and again, the integration going and with practices. And so everybody can come and be here for this. And also, I think for the Dakini practice this Saturday, I think what we'll do is we'll have that empowerment of Rinjin Dorje again, giving the empowerment of the Togao teachings of the Radiance. And it's about 45 minutes, and we'll just do it online there. Anybody can come online at 8 o'clock. And we'll do that because it just fits in totally, completely, and perfectly with what's happening. Yes, but nothing on Thursday. So, like to thank. Yes. Huh? What's that? Oh, Tuesday night. Yeah, this is a very great, wonderful period, having Francis here. And then Mr. Ma brought his teacher over Sunday. He actually was here for the Qigong practice on Wednesday, but he didn't actually lead. So I had a chance, Sarah and I had a chance to meet him. and he really is really a great qigong master and the real deal. So they're leaving. Mr. Ma is actually in Japan, and he's coming back Tuesday, and they're leaving, going back to China on Wednesday. But we're going to have on Tuesday night, they're going to come here and do a practice. Okay, it'll just be limited to people in the seminar. Okay. Well, it's official. We said 7 to 9, but we're going to try and aim for 6:30. If we guys are here early, and if we can have them come early, 6:30, and be out here by 8:30, because we go to bed early here, don't we? This coming Tuesday. So be here for 6:30, and we'll see you guys then. And we'll also see you Friday, and then we'll see each other on Wednesday. And if you want to come up and you have a question to Francis, please do. You're welcome to come up and chat for a bit. Thank you. It will be available. Can do that. We will do that. I have to check it out, but it should be about. I do want to turn this off right now, though. Bye.